On October 29, 2018, Lion Air Flight 610 crashed 13 minutes after departing Jakarta, Indonesia. On March 10, 2019, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 crashed 5 minutes after departing Addis Ababa Bole Airport. Both accidents were separated by 132 days. However, the similar equipment involved in both accidents cemented these two accidents together, namely the 737 MAX. But let's first analyze the information that never got reported, namely that what were the reasons the 730 MAX was designed, built, and purchased by not just Lion Air and Ethiopian Airlines, but whoever purchases it. Did Boeing twist anyone's arm to purchase the MAX? Did Boeing promise anything that was not expected in the airplane upon delivery? And was the MAX anything more or less than the manufacturer promised? The truth is, after all the damning coverage of the B737 MAX following the two accidents, there are two simple truths. One, the airlines that purchased the 737 MAX got exactly what they asked for when they opted for the airliner. And some airlines that purchased the MAX thought that they could operate in a way contrary to what the manufacturer designed or intended. In addition, so-called experts, many in the FAA and almost everybody in the NTSB, were too incompetent to understand what the Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 and Lion Air Flight 610 accidents represented. If these so-called experts or NTSB investigators ever worked for an airline that brought on new equipment, if they took the time to understand why new airliners are designed and built, if they could comprehend the cultures at the airlines that want to be big, way too fast and without the effort, these so-called experts should keep out of the discussion. They do nothing more than sow confusion and disinformation without hitting at the real reasons airliners crash. After all, isn't there enough ignorance in the aviation industry? Hello, I'm Stephen Carbone, and this is By Reason of Air Safety. So let's look at some other Boeing airliners of the past. Maybe we can get an idea of what this technology changes mean. The B707. Introduced in 1958, the Boeing 707, an airliner credited with familiarizing travelers to the airline jet age. A four-engine narrow-body airliner that closed the gap between countries separated by oceans. The 707 sported Stage 1 noise abatement turbojet engines, analog technologies, improved navigation, and radio equipment for long flights. Next, the B727, another narrow-body airliner. The 727 was introduced to the traveling public in 1964 with a three-man cockpit. The Boeing 727 expanded service from many novice and veteran airlines to smaller markets than the 707, which is beginning to be used more internationally. The 727 also sported Stage 1 engines, improved instrumentation over the 707, and with 3 turbojet engines compared to 4, improved range and operations in smaller airports. 747, Queen of the Skies, and the go-to image of wide-body airliners. The B747 was introduced to the international traveler in 1970. The B747 began with a three-man cockpit and sported new Stage 3 turbofan engines from inception, improved avionics, extended range, increased passenger transport capabilities, and an ability to serve multiple international markets. The B747 expanded and continues to expand an airline's reach. Its manufacturer history ended in 2023, but the 747 will continue to operate for decades to come. 757. Introduced in 1983, the 757 entered the market as a more versatile airliner, the second Boeing turbofan airliner designed with a two-man cockpit. Built for both domestic and, eventually, limited international markets, the B-757 was an expanded version of the B-727 and was built to introduce, namely, a narrow-body airliner with increasing versatility. The B-757 was introduced with a better wing design, better range, glass cockpit, more aerodynamic flight control design, improved noise reduction, and increased use of composite materials, especially in its flight controls. In other words, a more advanced airliner with better fuel economy, the 757 was designed into several variants. 767 was introduced a year earlier than the B-757 in 1982 as a wide-body airliner, the first being Boeing turbofan design with a two-man cockpit, later found in the B-757. The 767 was bound to increase passenger movements between large domestic markets such as New York's JFK and Los Angeles. But the 767 also anticipated the loosening of extended twin-engine operations, namely ETOPS, the flight rules of ETOPS, and approved itself an international airliner that could meet that increasing market, a twin-engine competitor for the three-engine DC-10 and L-1011. Again, impressive advancements, including the glass cockpit, wing designs, fuel economy, and the versatility of a wide body that met smaller wide body markets. The 777 and the 787 each entered the airline industry benefiting from the Boeings that preceded them. The B-777 arrived in 1995, the first airliner that was ETOPS from the box. The B-777 was put through its ETOPS qualifications before delivery, leaving it to the airline to complete the ETOPS certifications. The 777 sported more advanced avionics, more efficient engines, and among other improvements, an increased use of composites. The B-787 was introduced in 2011 and became the latest Boeing to step up the game in efficiency, reliability, and avionics advancements. ETOPS by this time had expanded range of operation, and the B-787 quickly took advantage of the certification, which increased flight fuel economy even more efficient engine designs, greater use of composites, and decreased flight times. With all of these Boeing models, there were improvements to each, depending on the customer's desires, to meet the airline customer's plans for the markets they participated in. In the 747, for instance, was modified to the 200 and the 300, then the 400 model, and then the Dash 08 and the SP. After many passenger to cargo conversions, Boeing designed cargo 747s. The 747 became the shuttle transport aircraft in the 1980s, Air Force One and the E-4's Emergency Airborne Command Post. The B-727 itself lengthened from the 27-100 to the 727-200. The 767 also grew from the 200 to the 400 extended range ER and cargo versions. And the 777 grew to the ER, the Dash 300 ER, to the 777X. They all had versatility. Boeings were equipped with larger and more efficient engines. Avionics became more reliable and could respond to changing conditions. Composites became lighter and stronger. As Boeing responded to the different airlines' requests, Boeing answered the request with a model airliner that fit the customer's needs. And that's the point. Boeing offered products. These products met the market requirements these airlines operated in. Boeing maintained its side of the bargain. What this demonstrates is the driver of new technologies. The same type of new technologies found in the B737 MAX were always the customers, the airlines that buy the new and improved technology in their airlines. Now let's look at the B737. Introduced in 1968, just as the 727 was driving growth in the airlines both domestic and foreign, the B737 became Boeing's new commitment to the growing local markets. The B-737 was originally designed to complement the 727. The 737 competed directly with the Douglas DC-9 for Douglas's market share. And like its sisters, the B-737 expanded beyond the B-737-100. Customers wanted improved engine performance, more aerodynamic improvements, and glass cockpit technologies that could fly the aircraft better and more efficiently than the pilot could. Airlines wanted the latest and greatest aircraft that could save fuel, time, and money. Unfortunately, many airlines didn't want to put the work in to ensure the airliner, in this case the MAX, succeeded. When I worked for FedEx, the airline was the launch customer for the MD-11. So let's talk about what new aircraft can do. FedEx had flown the DC-10-10 and the DC-10-30 for just over a decade, so the pilots and mechanics were very familiar with the model aircraft. However, even though the MD-11 closely resembled the DC-10 and they had many similarities, there were many important differences. The MD-11, for one, was a digital version of the DC-10. The MD-11 was longer, making the MD-11 more challenging during takeoff and landing. The MD-11's smaller horizontal stabilizer didn't help the aircraft with stability, and the stabilizer had a fuel tank in it. The MD-11 had a glass cockpit. There were weight-saving improvements from its fly-by-wire avionics package to the brakes on its landing gear. Alike, yet not alike. To repeat, some of the driving forces behind any air operator that purchases modern-day aircraft are the technological advances, whether it's fuel economy, the avionics package, or the aircraft's range. The Latin phrase, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware, is very applicable in these cases when buying aircraft, especially a new aircraft. The buyer, namely the airline, needs to avoid purchases that exceed their ability to operate safely. In the United States, the FAA keeps close restrictions on operations and airworthiness, for example, quality training, maintenance, flight planning, rest periods, and that safety isn't dictated by what the airline can afford. We spoke in the previous episodes about startup airlines like People Express, falling victim to the realities of running an airline, especially through the economy of the 1980s. People Express was not the only airline, an FAA-certificated airline, nor will it be the last airline to fall under the weight of financial difficulties. Having worked for an airline and the FAA, I've seen the various costs, both common and unconventional, that airlines cannot foresee. I've seen airlines make large mistakes by misreading the markets, the industry's need for new aircraft, global economies, the cargo and passenger traffic across the globe, and political impacts. And from these features, an airline could grow exponentially, or they could end up with a brand new fleet when they go out of business. The 737 MAX was introduced in 2017. When an airline orders a new aircraft, it's often in blocks of various numbers, meaning the airline orders more than one per order. According to the model and demand, the order could take years before delivery and years to complete the delivery order of how many aircraft are ordered. A manufacturer could receive orders while the model is still in design and certification. As a result of being a launch customer, the delivery of the first airliner could be delayed by design certification problems, delays in improvements, process specifications, programming difficulties, material supplies, even labor problems like strikes. And the challenge after delivery is to work on the new aircraft's reliability. Post-delivery glitches and pilot mechanic honeymoon periods can take months, maybe years, to work out the bugs. When an airliner is purchased from the manufacturer, does the manufacturer, whether it's Airbus, Embraer, Bombardier, or Boeing, just drop off the aircraft off, grab a smoothie, and then hightail it out of town? No. Despite what the uninformed will tell you, the manufacturer is heavily involved in the customer's airline's acclimation of the new aircraft. The manufacturer provides 1. Training on the aircraft, both pilot and mechanic. 2. Specialized training in new technologies. 3. Flight training. 4. Advice on parts, support equipment, and storage. 5. 24/7 support. And 6, and so on. The manufacturer doesn't ignore the customer. I've seen manufacturer support from Boeing. I've seen it from McDonnell Douglas and Airbus. This is what the experts get wrong. In each accident, the manufacturer doesn't ignore the customer. Training is provided by the manufacturer to acclimate the airline to its new purchase. That sounds like something the manufacturer offers as an incentive, but it's not. If you think about the important adjustments the airline will go through, understand the manufacturer provides for aircraft-specific familiarization. Other training that is not so aircraft-specific will be taught by the manufacturer to the airline's training departments, such as cargo loading and operation of the cargo doors, special parts handling, component repairs, and flight attendant familiarization with cabin equipment. But training that will be with the responsibility of the manufacturer, at least in the initial point, is 1. Pilot certification, familiarization, differences training. For instance, the 737 MAX against the 737-800 or the 737-500. Differences training. 2. Initial pilot training. 3. Maintenance familiarization training as well. Just like with the MAX compared to the 800, maintenance and operations both get this type of training from the manufacturer. Initially from the manufacturer. 4. New technologies such as composites training. And 5. Avionics training, especially today's date with new aircraft, the avionics packages are so much more intense. The support for maintenance doesn't end. The aircraft are under warranty and support continues through the lifetime of the aircraft. In the fast-paced airline industry, no airline is an island. Airlines do work together even though the logos don't match. They share resources, especially in the outstations where mechanics rely on each other for everyday tasks. To understand whether an airline mechanic works on another airline's airplane as a contract maintenance or maintenance support is offered to those unfamiliar with the aircraft between airlines. In the wake of the 2018 Lion Air B737 MAX accident and the 2019 Ethiopian Airlines B737 MAX accident, the media, the so-called experts, the NTSB, who did not lead the investigations into those aircraft accidents, the Indonesian and the Ethiopian investigation teams, all jumped on Boeing, focused solely on Boeing, and ignored any other contributors to the tragedies. See, it was easy. Just pick one focal point, in this case Boeing, badger them, attack them, repeat. It didn't take experience, knowledge, skill, or even attention to safety, just somebody to be the punching bag. But in 2024, when Alaska Airlines 1282, another B737 MAX, lost a window in flight, an event that happened inside the United States borders, all of the old so-called experts returned to beat up Boeing. Again, NTSB board members and inexperienced media added their opinions. But nobody asked the important questions like, where did the Indonesian and Ethiopian investigators get their experience in the B737 MAX's technology to properly investigate them? 2. What were the FAA's failures as overseers of Boeing? How did that play into an accident? 3. Why didn't anybody notice the NTSB didn't come close to solving the Alaska Airlines event? 4. Why didn't anyone question either of the three airlines' parts in what happened? 5. What wasn't contract maintenance questioned? Why wasn't contract maintenance questioned? 6. Where was the media getting their questionable aviation information? 7. Why were the NTSB board members allowed to comment on what they didn't understand and make a big thing about it in the media? And 8, why wasn't anyone focusing on root cause? The real tragedy is that in all 3 accidents, all the focus on Boeing distracted attention away from what were the real problems, the serious safety issues. Now, when we analyze the Lion Air 610 and the Ethiopian Airlines 302 accidents, keep in mind the points brought out here in this episode. The media and so-called experts were quick to condemn the MAX in areas they knew nothing about. Consider, were airlines lacking the qualifications to fly an advanced airliner like the B737 MAX? Did they provide their pilots with proper training and organization? Did they take responsibility for their failures? Look, I'm not saying that the 737 MAX didn't have its faults, but United States Airlines who flew the MAX were not among those who looked to ground the MAX. There were no reported problems outside the normal reconciling period for these American US-based airlines. And that says something. So whether they ignored their part in the accident or not, any airline who didn't invest the time and effort in learning the new airliner would find out how unqualified they were the hard way. Until next time, I am Stephen Carbone reminding you to tab. Think safe, act safe, be safe. God bless.